if you've known me for any length of time, you know that I have always loved the 88 to 92 Mazda MX-6 or 626. I've learned how to wrench and diagnose on them. I've learned how to modify and race them, and subsequently blow them up several times and attempt to fix them lots of times. So I know my way around these cars, and today I've sold the dash out of this maroon MX-6 GT. I hate to part this car out. It belonged to a friend of mine. It's got a lot of miles on it, but it's really rusty. The bottom of the car is super rusty. It's just not worth putting back on the road. So if you need anything from this car, feel free to drop a comment. Anyway, I'm going to show you step by step how to pull the entire dashboard without breaking any parts. And all you need are regular tools, sockets and wrenches and screwdrivers, nothing special. So anyway, hopefully you enjoy. I've pushed the car in the garage, made it a little bit easier to work at night. Really didn't want to hang out with all the bugs outside. So right now we're going to start on the left lower dash panel. Now this is an 89 car, so 88 and 89 are all the same. However, 90 to 92 are a little bit different. They have a metal brace behind the plastic lower dash panel. It's just another set of 10mm bolts to take out. I can't really show you that because this is an 89. However, for this task you'll need a 17mm open-end wrench and a Phillips screwdriver of your choice. So we're going to start by pulling the black plastic that sits above your toes out. To do that, you take your Phillips screwdriver and you remove a couple of the clips. They're just these plastic screws that come right out. You can get them a little loose and then you can pull on them. Well, that one was only attached by one. And then there's like a push tab in the very back. You pinch it together and then you remove this piece. You take your 17mm wrench, the open end, and the hood pop cable you need to loosen up. If you notice, there's a slot in the bottom of this piece. You take, sometimes it's loose, like this one was already loose, but you take your 17 wrench and you loosen that off. If you try to pry this out, you're going to break it. So there's that 17mm that locks this cable to this lower dash component here. All right, so next we're going to take the Phillips screws that hold this piece in. There's two on either side above, towards the instrument cluster. There's one, two, and then there's one down here in the corner, one on this corner, and then there's one here on the outside. All right, so that's all out. And then you just gently pull on this. This one came out a little easier since the column cover was already off. That was taken apart before I got the car. But it just comes down. You just got to be gentle with it. So you just start unplugging all these switches and the speaker. Some of the cars will have the adjustable suspension switch if it's a turbo car. And then you have your dimmer switch, your fog light switch. And this piece is loose. Now, remember when I said the 90 to 92 cars were different? This is where it's different. There's a black metal shield that's kind of to protect your legs from going into the dash and puncturing them on something sharp like a column. So the 90 to 92 cars have that. It's just held in with a bunch of 10mm. So next we're going to take the glove box and the right side lower dash out. Now this all comes out in one piece from this area here all the way to the center stack. So to do this, we're going to start out by taking the black plastic under shield here, just like on the other side. And that's pretty simple to do. It has the same style clips as the other side. And then out that goes. As you can see, that's less than desirable looking. All right, next we're going to take some Phillips screws out. Start with the hard one here on the corner. And the one down here. One down here in this corner. And then you've got one here and one here. So next we need to pull on this. Just be gentle. It doesn't take any major force. And this comes down. You have to pull the light out of there. There's a glove box light switch and the speaker connector, and the glove box is out. So the next thing we need to pull out is the center console. There is an order to this. We need to pull out the rear section first and then the front section, which grants us access to the bottom bolts of the dash. So to get this out, you open this up and you'll notice there are two Phillips screws in there. We're going to get those out. So the next thing we do is pull the screws at the rear of the console, and to do that, you move the seats all the way forward, and you can get access to these screws here. We're gonna go ahead and get the other side done. All right, and the last two screws for this center console are actually underneath this little pocket and the parking brake boot. So to get that out, take our screwdriver and gently find a way to work this up. There's a metal tab in here that will get bent on occasion. It's really not the end of the world if it gets bent. Just kind of pull up evenly. And then you'll probably hear it there. It released there. There's a tab there. And then just walk this off. And now you can see the next two screws to remove. So the other two screws you need to take out are at the front of the console. There's this screw here and then the one on the other side. And the last thing you need to do now is remove the shift knob. Now, on a stock car, there's an accordion boot and then the shift knob, the factory shift knob. This one has an aftermarket boot and just this ball shift knob. So this just unthreads. The stock one does as well. Actually, that one really wasn't on there. So the stock one unthreads, and then there's like the top of the boot kind of snaps into the bottom of the shift knob. You'll see when you start to remove it. So now that the console is loose, we can literally just grab it and pull it up. And then the same thing for the front one. So the console is now out. And as you can see, there are the bottom two bolts. It's the same on the other side. They are 10 millimeters. So next we're going to drop the steering column. This allows us to get the dash out. You cannot pull the dash out with the steering column in, as the steering column bolts into the dash itself. So the first thing we're going to do now that that panel's out of the way is you just take your antenna and pull on it. And the second thing is this. Sometimes there's a screw holding it in depending on what year it is, but usually you can just pull this duct out of the way. Nobody needs that anyway. And this, now of course, since this one was missing the column cover, there's not as much to show you, but you have all these connectors go to the combination switch, like cruise control, turn signal, wiper, and then you have your ignition switch, which you can just leave plugged in and dangle. And this will show you where the column bolts in. They are 12 millimeters, there's 4 of them, so we're gonna go ahead and unbolt those, but first we need to take the second duct out, and you just pull on these. They're not really held in with any fasteners. Now we're gonna go ahead and unbolt the column. Doing. And when you get that last one out, this column will kind of fall down a little bit. Now it's not really necessary to pull this out, but I am stripping this dash down and taking some of the stuff out of it. So I'm going to show you how to pull the gauge cluster and gauge cluster bezel. It's really easy. With the column out of the way, it's even easier. So first you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3 screws along the top edge. And to get those out, you just knock them out like this. Now there is a fourth, and it is hiding behind this. You just take your screwdriver and kind of turn it sideways, and then that little bezel comes off. And you take your Phillips screwdriver and get that out. And then this is ready to come out. So we gotta be gentle here because we don't want to crack the dash. Just kind of walk your fingers around it. And then we can start unplugging the defroster and the hazard switch and the clock. And then the oscillating vents. And next you take your Phillips and you take the 4 screws out that hold the gauge cluster to the dashboard itself. And that is ready to come out. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to pop the hood and I'm going to get all the excess slack of the speedometer cable towards the speedometer. And what that does is it allows the cluster to come out far enough where we can unhook it. So now you just pull on the cluster, kind of tilt it down, reach your hand back and start disconnecting the connectors. There you go. Pulls that pin up. So you got to push on this and it pulls that pin up, which allows this thing to slide off the back of the cluster. So now we need to take the A-pillar trim out. To do so, it's pretty easy. These are pretty fragile, but there is a light there. There is a little screw cap cover that is going to break anytime you go to touch it or think about it. So don't do either one. But really, you have to get this off, and there's a Phillips screw behind this, and the rest of that they're just clips that run the entire length all the way back to the B pillar. Please don't break, please don't break. Aha! Now before we start prying, we need to pull on this piece and kind of get this unclipped for the first little bit. This is pretty fragile, so just work your way across. Sounds terrible, but it's really coming off the right way. All right, now that that's loose, you can see that this snaps into this piece. Pull your weather stripping away. And if you look through this side, you can see where all the clips are. This is probably going to break because it is 1,000,000 years old and it's been baking in the sun, not in a garage. But we're gonna do our best. There's one.
That one broke. There's two. Probably broke, but didn't. 3, 4.
Now at the back of this, you have to kind of push the clips out also on the B pillar trim, which is also the C pillar trim, just so you can get this loose. And then you'll see how this kind of snaps in the same way it does with that cross piece, and then this just slides right on out. So now we get to the hardest part. Well, what I consider the hardest part. Underneath this little cap, there is a 10mm bolt. You can see it right here. You can't really easily get a ratchet on it. I mean, you could probably get a really shallow quarter drive. What I like to use is this. It's a quarter drive, like flex socket, 10mm, and then I can I use this long extension in my impact and it'll come right out. All right, next we're going to take out the 210s on the side and the 210s that are down here, which apparently weren't there beforehand. So there's 2 bolts that are supposed to be there. If they're not there, your dash has been out. You can see this is starting to get a little loose, and we're going to go ahead and do that on the other side now. So before we go pulling on the dash, you need to remove these. These go on the tunnel at the firewall. These are behind this cover is the engine control unit. There's these little tabs that you kind of use your fingernail to pull the centers out. They fall right out. They're really easy. I figured I wouldn't show you how to do that, just tell you about it. So now that those are out, you can start moving the dash a little bit. As you can see, it's very loose. So there's a couple connections down here, and I'm going to show you those now. Okay, we're going to start off with the big connectors. The white one right here. They just have a little push tab. And I think that's it for that side. Then you take this harness, and these are the instrument cluster connectors. You kind of pull those out of the way, otherwise they'll get hung up. And just check and see what else is tight here. So there's one connector that goes to the fuse box. It is this green connector, and you just push that tab and pull it out. And now we're going to go to the other side. So we're going to kind of lift this up and out, see what we've got. So there's a big connector down here. That's for the HVAC. There's a blend door connector, and then connect another connector for your climate control. And one more right here. It's kind of hard to see. Sometimes they put the tab underneath this foam. And that looks like it's pretty loose. So the dash is ready to come out. I verified that nothing is plugged in anymore. I'm not going to get caught on anything. It's important to note that vehicles with a manual climate control, the non-turbo versions of these cars, and the 626, they have cables that go to the heater box and the AC box, the evaporator. Those move the blend door, so you need to disconnect the cables from the climate control. This is going to be a lot easier on a turbo car, as a turbo Mx-6, as opposed to any of the other cars, because you just unplug the connectors. But the cables are not that hard to deal with. So it is much easier to pull the dash out on the passenger side because you don't have to go over the top of the steering column. You do not need to remove the steering column for this task, unless you're totally stripping the car, which I will be at some point, but I'm not ready to take the column out. So I'm going to show me pulling the dash out this side. It's really easy. You just got to walk it out and support it the best you can. You got to kind of tilt it forward. And there we go. As you can see, it's not really that hard, especially compared to modern cars. These are very easy cars to work on. If you need any parts from this car or any other cars from this generation, I have tons. I have duplicates and triplicates. Of course, there's some parts that I won't sell, but most things I will. I'm happy to get rid of them as long as they put another car back on the road. Don't forget to subscribe, and if there's anything else you'd like to see on these cars, I've pretty much done it all. So drop a comment and let me know what that is.